Welcome in once again and almost for the last time for the 2024 fantasy football season to the most accurate podcast here at 4 for 4. I am Matt Okada. I am here with John Paulson. It is, except for the very few leagues that play into week 18, the fantasy semifinals, week 16. 3 weeks left of the NFL season, if you count this one. 2 weeks left of the fantasy football season if you make it to the championship, which hopefully most of the people here do because they listen to this show, and there's no better way to make it. John, do you have remaining playoff teams this week?
Still have one alive, and it's my final hurrah. But I'm not in that many managed leagues, so it's the ratio isn't terrible. But I've been trying to cut back. I used to play in 8. I don't know about you, but 8 to 10 leagues. Waivers gets to be a lot, so I've ratcheted it back to 4 managed leagues and some best ball. And my point per first down charity best ball team plays Matthew Berry in the semifinal. Jen Eakins is in the other semifinal against Rotopat Doherty from Roto World. So that's a fun one to watch because it's a point per first down best ball. I'm trying to, before I retire in 10 years or so, put as big a dent in PPR as possible and get as many people on board with point per first down so that when I leave this mortal coil, they can remember me for something. True. That's killing PPR. That's my goal. Anyway, how about you, Matt? Did you ask that question so that I would ask you?
No.
Your teams are in the playoffs.
I was genuinely curious because it is such an interesting thing with people in the industry, how many leagues they play in and how far they survive. And a lot of people think, oh, well, we should win all our leagues. But the reality is we mostly play with a bunch of people in the industry, so it's still an even playing field. I'm not playing against Matthew Berry anywhere. Also, go 4 for 4 finals in that league.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
I am still in the semis in 4 of 8 leagues. I am in 8 leagues, but in fairness, 4 of them are dynasty leagues, so the waivers hardly exist there. That makes it a lot more manageable. But still alive in those 4. 2 of them I'm the reigning champ, so I'm going for back-to-backs in 2. We will see.
Good luck.
Thank you. And good luck to everybody who's in here gathering the necessary information to win this week. Reminder, if you drop questions in the YouTube or Twitter chats, we will get to those in the Q&A at the end of the show. If you have start this guy or start that guy questions, you can go to John's rankings. But otherwise, drop something in the chat. All right, Thursday Night Football. Maybe it's just me, but the score feels a lot more exciting than the game was. I don't know exactly. Okay, it's not just me. John is nodding. It might be that these teams are kind of just sluggish, although both quarterbacks ended up with pretty good days, all things considered. 284 yards and 2 for Herbert, 263 and 2 for Bo Nix. That being said, the receivers largely weren't all that great. Ladd McConkey did have 6 catches for 87 yards, but even in PPR, that's less than 15 fantasy points. And if you're not in PPR, not getting the touchdown feels disappointing. Everybody else at the receiving positions was not very good. Marvin Mims had 3 for 62, but no one started him. Courtland Sutton only had 5 for 50, which is a huge disappointment for him after the recent stretch he's had. Javonte Williams was great. He had 7 catches on 11 targets, but only for 29 yards, and he didn't really do anything rushing the ball. So all around, not super great in the pass catching scenario. And then at the running back position, Audric Estime led the Broncos, but it didn't mean much because no one on the team had 10 carries. He had 48 yards and did get a touchdown, so he squeaked in an okay game. And then Gus Edwards scored twice on the ground and had one 43-yard run that made his day pretty decent. All in all, I don't know. It just didn't feel that exciting. Do you have any insights on this game that I didn't have, John?
Well, in all honesty, I
Major
didn't watch
takeaways?
it. I was at my son's basketball game last night. I was watching the score, and my main thing was, I ranked Bo Nix fairly high this week. I told people to start Bo Nix. Got lots of questions about Bo Nix and should I start him over players? And I was saying yes. I think you should start Bo Nix. He's the QB9 on the year. The Chargers defense has been a little leakier the last few weeks, and so I'm glad that, just from my own personal standpoint, that he did well. Um, but when you have a game where Hassan Haskins, Darius Davis, Michael Burton, and Devon Vele are the four players who caught touchdown passes, you're going to have some upset folks out there. Also, Javonte Williams, I thought about writing him up for sneaky starts, and I was just like, I don't know. Like, they might feature Audric Estime in this one. I don't have any confidence. They both scored about the same in PPR because of Javonte's 7 catches. It looks like he had about 12.5 points. Estime had, 11. So, like, those are okay spot starts. So people, who were stuck starting them are probably like, all right. The only person that's really, the quarterback, people that have the Herbert or Knicks are probably happy. The only other person that's happy is Gus Edwards managers that were forced
Yep.
to start him as an RB2 or a flex because you're not expecting 2 touchdowns out of him. Maybe you're happy if you get 50 yards and a touchdown out of him, because the running game for the Chargers has been really bad. But he averaged 4.9 yards per carry, almost got to 70 yards. Obviously doesn't do anything as a receiver, 1 catch for 3 yards. But the 2 touchdowns, huge, could be a week winner for anybody who was forced to start him.
Incidentally, for anybody getting really excited about Edwards and his yards per carry, he was 13 for 25 on all the other runs besides the 43-yarder.
I see that he had a long of about 43,
Yeah,
which is really going to help that average.
and it was probably the best run of his career. He was falling forward for half of it, I feel like. I think the most actionable takeaway, if there is one, and there really isn't much one, is just I have no interest in playing the Broncos running back game ever again. Like, both of them kind of fell into okay days because Javonte got 11 targets and caught 7 of them in PPR only. He was good. And then Estime got the touchdown. But Sean Payton is just fully committed to, we're not going to pick any one guy, and we'll switch it up drive to drive and give some guys pass catching and give some guys goal line work, and it will not be reliable for fantasy. So if you have one of those guys and you make it to your championship, I would really be trying to find another solution. All right, that is TNF. Let's get into some news. The big headline of the week, Kirk Cousins was benched by the Atlanta Falcons, not at all injury related, unless you count his inability to move or throw the ball downfield as injury related. Benched for Michael Penix Jr., the rookie, number, I want to say 9 overall pick. It might have been 8. I should know this. Who obviously was the surprise pick of the draft. All kinds of consternation by Falcons fans and draft pundits alike on why the Falcons would sign a gazillion-dollar quarterback and then draft one in the top 10. But apparently this is why they drafted their one in the top 10. Still can't tell you why they signed the gazillion-dollar quarterback. Fallout for Atlanta for you, John, and I guess worth asking, in a 2-quarterback league, do you have any interest in Michael Penix Jr.?
Not at this time. But people that are in 2-quarterback leagues are sometimes extremely desperate and just trying to find a starter, especially if it's depending on the scoring system, super flex, etc. Whether or not they can actually start a different player in that position or a different position in that position. Penix comes in. I have a rookie quarterback model that's based on their college stats, and it's just basically a starting point for me. But it comes in with 6.71 yards per attempt expected, expected 3% interception rate, 3.5% touchdown rate. This is just rookie year expectations. And the thing that it's really good at is predicting rushing yards. And Penix was not a big runner in College, he could do a little bit. It's funny, you go to the quarterbacks in college because they count sack yards against their rushing, so a lot of them are negative 180 or something. But he was, I think, slightly positive. So he comes in at 9.5 rushing yards per game. So he's probably more than Kirk Cousins is going to offer, which is not surprising at this stage of Kirk Cousins' career. But he's not a big runner. He's not going to come in and get 20, 30, 40 yards rushing every game like Bo Nix has or Drake May. So from that standpoint, I think this is a downgrade for the Atlanta passing game, just initially, because we just don't know what he's going to bring. They obviously feel that he might be an upgrade over Kirk Cousins if they're willing to bench Kirk Cousins at this point in the season for him. It's a little surprising, but you have a very experienced passer who has provided fantasy-wise low-end QB1 numbers for years and years and years in Kirk Cousins. He's had a bad stretch. So now they're benching him and they're going to go with the rookie. Where is Atlanta in the playoff hunt? Is they still alive, or is this the end of the road?
Yeah, no, they're in it. They are 7-7. The Commanders are 9-5 in the last wild card spot, so they would need some help. They would need some losses, and Seattle's also still ahead of them at 8-6, and Arizona's tied with them at 7-7. So it'd be tough, but they're going to be trying to make it, obviously.
Yeah, I wonder if they are looking at this like it's an opportunity to see him, and then they can decide on what to do with Cousins after the season. It sounds like it's a long shot for the playoffs, but they need to win. They need to win out and need some help. It sounds like. So I think that's sort of. I mean, if they were sitting there in the last wild card spot, I don't think that they make this move. But Cousins would have had to play better in order for them to be in this position. Bottom line for me is that this is a downgrade for Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, such as it is with Kyle Pitts. But who knows? These rookies come in, they're the big unknowns, like a mystery box, how they're going to perform in the first few games, especially. So it could be a shot in the arm in this passing game. My guess is not, but that's just history of rookie quarterbacks coming in.
Yeah, especially this late in the year, really hard to trust that. I will say, I remember seeing a stat this week that Cousins had 1 touchdown and 9 turnovers in his last 5 games, which is horrendous. So it isn't too hard to be much better than he's been recently.
That's true.
But late season rookie coming out of nowhere basically is a little difficult. We'll keep an eye on that. Any impact to you for Bijan Robinson? Or is it just...
Yeah, I mean, it could work both ways for him. They could be more run heavy if they are trying to kind of protect the quarterback and make life easy for him. It could, which would help him in more touches, but it also could reduce the number of scoring chances that he has if they can't move the ball. So the thing is with Cousins is that he's been around forever and we can predict him. And even if he's had a bad stretch in the last few games, he's probably going to regress to the mean and be decent. But we just don't know what's going to happen with a rookie like Michael Penix.
In similar quarterback benching news, the Browns are moving on from the Jameis Winston experiment that lasted a little while and was very entertaining, but didn't get them many wins, to Dorian Thompson-Robinson, which, I understand that Jameis turns the ball over a lot, but DTR has shown not much in his few attempts at starting or playing. Do you have any excitement about him over Jameis? I'm going to assume not, especially for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, not at all. I think Jameis, we can put to the bed the theory that was my theory. I think that the post LASIK Jameis turned the ball over, and that was the reason for his, or pre LASIK Jameis couldn't see. That's why he was turning the ball over so much. Got LASIK. Things were better for a little while, but have kind of now he can clearly see the people he's throwing interceptions to, I think. So he just has a propensity to throw interceptions. I hate this move for the Cleveland passing game and as a fantasy analyst, because this is just you're going from a huge volume, 40 pass attempt, 250 plus, couple touchdowns passing game to Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and his career number. I posted on Blue Sky. Yes, you should be worried about your Cleveland pass catchers. His career numbers: 3.7 yards per attempt. Is lower than his interception percentage, 4.8%. 1 touchdown and 7 interceptions.
Oh my gosh.
Like, if this continues, it's going to be really dire for Jerry Jeudy, any of the other pass catchers there. So the Browns coaching staff has to know something, or they're just, I don't know if they're tanking. Why not just tank with Jameis?
Entertaining tanking.
Maybe they're trying to see if DTR is capable of being their backup next year to whoever they end up getting at quarterback. So this is a big downgrade in terms of scoring possibilities for the Browns, unless he's turned a corner and surprises us. But based on 146 pass attempts career wise, it's been pretty ugly. Completion percentage, by the way, 51.4%. With that yards per attempt of 3.7. So, it's rough.
Jeudy had basically become a must start. Does he fall out of starter range with this? Or does he just become like more fringy?
Yeah, I mean, you don't remember where he was before this really hot run with Jameis. I mean, he was kind of a wide receiver 3-ish. I would say 2-3-ish right now with Tillman, still out. If Tillman is back, he might get pushed down a little bit further because the passing pie is now about half the size it was with Jameis Winston. So you can't count on, I mean, he could still lead the team with 11 targets, but how good are these targets? I mean, yards per attempt of 3.7, you're only talking about 40 yards passing. So if that continues, I would be looking to get out of that. Hopefully managers who have been counting on him have some other options that they could kind of turn to in the short term.
Very unfortunate. Also very unfortunate, David Montgomery suffered a what was thought to be significant injury. He's gonna still be out for the rest of the fantasy season, so that's really what matters to us, obviously, in terms of fantasy analysis. He got some second opinions and might be back for the NFL playoffs, which is pretty great for the Lions. We'll see if that actually happens. But regardless, he will be out for fantasy. I guess the main follow-up questions are, how good is Jahmyr Gibbs with David Montgomery out? Obviously, whoever has Jahmyr Gibbs is starting him anyway, so this is just an excitement meter thing. And do you have any interest in Craig Reynolds as a very deep play, given how much they used Montgomery in conjunction with Gibbs?
Yeah, I looked up Craig Reynolds to see if he would be worth, ranking in the top 30 or 40. His games that he played with David Montgomery out, and there were 3 of them, I think it was about 7 carries per game. So it's not like he takes over the David Montgomery role. He takes over about half of it. And then you look at Jahmyr Gibbs, who is my fantasy RB1 this week overall, because of what his workload was over the last 2 seasons. 26 games with Montgomery, he averaged 12.1 carries. 3 games without, he averaged 18 carries. Average rushing yards 65 with Montgomery, 100 yards without Montgomery rushing. Receptions 2.9 with Montgomery, 5.0 without Montgomery. So you're talking about a jump in half PPR from 15.5 low end RB1, high end RB2 numbers to 19.7, pushing, if not overall RB1 Christian McCaffrey type fantasy numbers. So if the Lions do what they have done with Montgomery out in the past, then Gibbs is a must start. Obviously, you might want to work him into some DFS lineups or some prize picks or something as well. And if the only thing that could kind of stand in the way of this is, okay, Montgomery's out for the year or is likely out for the year, we have to protect Gibbs. So we have to give Reynolds more than what we have in the past. Because I think in the past, they're like, okay, well, Montgomery will be back in a week or 2 or whatever, and Gibbs can carry the load this week. So that's my one concern. But I worry about everything. Like, there's so much nuance to this that I could constantly see both sides of everything. But there's definitely reasons to be excited about Jahmyr Gibbs. I would absolutely start him. You might want to pick up Reynolds if you are in dire straits at running back just to see what happens this week, because either he could be in a Montgomery role and do okay, or Gibbs could get nicked up and have to miss next week. And now you've got Craig Reynolds, who's likely a 18 touch back in a really good running game. So that's sort of where we're at with the Lions running game.
Makes sense. An interesting one that I didn't even really remember existed. Hollywood Brown has been activated for the Kansas City Chiefs for Saturday's game, by the way. If you are setting your schedule for football watching this week, the Chiefs and Texans play on Saturday, and the Steelers and Ravens play on Saturday. So tune in for that. Any interest at all in Hollywood Brown? And if not, what does this do to Mahomes, if anything, and to the other receivers there, which was already kind of murky? And you also have the additional wrinkle of Mahomes' ankle injury, though he has been cleared to play.
Yeah, full practices this week, and he's a tough player. Clearly, I think they're trying to get that 1 seed locked up, and then they'll shut him down until the playoffs if they can make that happen. The Hollywood Brown return is probably happening at a good time for fantasy. I don't think anybody with Hopkins or Worthy has to worry too much about him this week. Certainly, maybe if he really comes, he's been out so long, so they're going to ramp him up. I expect him to be a real part-time player this week. I don't have him projected for much in terms of stats or even snaps. And the person he'll probably impact the most is Juju Smith-Schuster as opposed to Hopkins and Worthy. And then, next week, I don't think folks are really excited about starting Hopkins or Worthy, but they sort of have to if they're wide receiver 3, because this is who I have, and at least they have some upside with Mahomes. I wouldn't worry about it over the next 2 weeks, with those two guys and Marquise Brown, and certainly not excited about Marquise Brown right now as a fantasy asset, maybe heading into next year. But they've obviously, adding Hopkins, adding Juju Smith-Schuster, they've added some people that, Brown is supposed to fill those roles and, has been out. So he's kind of been Wally pipped or whatever. His spot's kind of eaten up right now, and he has to work his way back up the depth chart.
A couple other quick running back things. Sincere McCormick, while this is a piece of news, Sincere McCormick headed to IR. Obviously, there was a couple weeks there we were sort of excited about him maybe being the answer to the Raiders' running back problems, finally. He kind of was for the few carries he got, but then he got hurt. So now he is out, which means we're back to Amir Abdullah or Alexander Madison. They get the Jaguars this week, so are you starting either of those guys? Both?
Yeah, initially, I saw this, and Sincere McCormick, I realized that he left the game early. He didn't run well prior to that. In the previous games he ran well, but in this particular game last week he did not. And then Alexander Madison was the primary ball carrier, and Amir Abdullah was the primary pass catcher. He finished with 7 for 58 and a touchdown. He led the backfield with 10 touches, so he had 3 carries. He led the backfield in snaps, 46%. So initially I was like, okay, Madison's probably back in that lead role, and Abdullah is just kind of a change of pace. But I think in this game, I would prefer to start Abdullah in half PPR and full PPR formats, because he's been very involved as a pass catcher, even with McCormick's ascension. He's got, I think, Abdullah's 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games or his last 5 games receiving. And the Jaguars specifically have given up the 5th most receptions this year to running backs and the 2nd most yards to running backs. So they've been, a Swiss cheese when it comes to covering running backs. Madison can catch the ball too, but Abdullah is a little better at it. So I think in PPR, and if I had to pick, or half PPR, if I had to pick between these two, I would go with Abdullah just based on recent performance and the fact that receptions are worth more than carries. And I think Madison is startable as well in a pinch, but I definitely prefer Abdullah.
If you ever wonder how wild this game that we play is, just imagine myself back when Amir Abdullah had that preseason run as a rookie and we thought he was the next great thing. It was the most electric running back we'd seen. And the first time he'd ever be of any use for fantasy after that was on the Raiders in his early 30s as a pass catching back in the fantasy semifinals. Good gracious. Last bit of injury news here or overall news. Nick Chubb, really sad. Also headed to IR. Had just obviously come off from the significant knee injury last year. He is back to IR and will miss the rest of the season. Very possibly not be back with the Cleveland Browns. I think he'll probably be back somewhere else because he's still young, but my goodness, has his injury history been rough. With him out, that means the Browns turn to primarily, you would expect, Jerome Ford. So this one, at least we have a little bit easier answer than Abdullah or Madison, although there are some other guys in the depth chart there. Do you have excitement for Jerome Ford? Is he going into a starting lineup, in your opinion?
I mean, I would expect Donta Foreman to be active and get a few carries. Pierre Strong as well could be rotated in, but Jerome Ford, top 20 type, top 22 type running back for me, depending on the format. Certainly in PPR, half PPR, he does catch a lot of passes. Ford didn't perform as well as expected at the beginning of this year based on what he did last year. Last year, he was the RB 18 after Chubb's injury. So really rock solid RB2 numbers. This year, in the first 5 weeks with Chubb sidelined, Ford was the fantasy RB 28. So I think somewhere in that range between 28 and 18 is what we should sort of be expecting. This offense is not humming. We have a quarterback change, which is, if it was Winston, I would think you would feel even better about Ford than I do. But I do think that there are 15 touches, available here off the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. The Bengals are also not very good against the run. They're giving up 123 total yards, 1.1 touchdowns to opposing backfields this year. So it is a good matchup. I am concerned about this offense with DTR at quarterback.
We had some high hopes for some of these guys, and this move from Jameis is really unfortunate. Cleveland, why do you do this to us? All right. We will get into some more current injury news as far as what to look forward to or pay attention to heading into the weekend. Before we do, quick note read from our sponsor, Prize Picks, and then some picks to make some moolah from John.
Hey everyone, John Paulson here. We know there are a ton of options out there for real money sports action, but we have found one that really stands out from the rest. Prize Picks. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. It's easy to play, and now you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as few as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is also the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. They call it the Reboot. So your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If you sign up today, you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5, and that $50 bonus is guaranteed whether you win or not. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. I play Prize Picks weekly, and I'll have a couple of my favorite plays for you after the break. So download the app today and use TMAP, TMAP, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, just download the Prize Pick app. Use the promo code TMAP, TMAP, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game.
Do we have a week in review for last week, John?
No, it's as much as I can, and I'm sure people who are following me know that either are cursing my name or are praising my glorious picks, but it's just enough time for me to get my picks together before the podcast without having to look at what happened last week. If I remember correctly, it didn't go well, but I might be mistaken. But this week it's going to go great. James Conner, I'm going to go with more than 82.5 rushing yards. Or if that doesn't float your boat, that is a pretty high number for just rushing. You could do 106.5 total yards or 18.5 fantasy score. I would go more on all three of those. Trey Benson and Amari DiMercato are both out. Connor was getting more pass routes with DiMercato out, and now Benson is out, so I think he might see could see every touch in this one. DJ Dallas
Yeah.
is the only backup that they have and hasn't seen much work at all. Might just get a handful of carries to just give Connor a break. In his last 2 games, he has 122 total yards, 138 total yards, with 90 and 110 yards rushing, respectively. He's gone over this rushing number 7 times, even with Benson and DeMercado active this year. So about half the time he still goes over this number, but now his top 2 backups are out. On top of that, you have a matchup that is fantastic. The Panthers have allowed 9 running backs to rush for more than 82.5 rushing yards, including 5 in their last 6 games. So James Conner. My other pick this week is Bucky Irving. I'm going to go with more than 59.5 rushing yards. I hate playing unders. Connor Allen is the under king. I call myself the over king, even though I don't always win. But I hate playing unders. It's just stressful, unless it's an obvious one. Anyway, Bucky Irving, more than 59.5 rushing yards against Dallas. Dallas's rush defense has been a little bit better of late, but Irving and the Tampa running game is red hot. It's really wild to see the Buccaneers, after they couldn't run it all last year, are like in the top 5 in rushing yards per game, and it's almost all due to Bucky Irving. He made it through week 15 relatively unscathed. He's gone over this number in 4 straight non-injury games. And on the season, the Dallas is a good matchup, even though they've been a little bit better. I think the Tampa running game is just real hot right now, and I'll take them against the Cowboys.
Love both. Both are on playoff teams I have, so sign me up. All righty, let's get into some injury news. Alvin Kamara, unlikely to play in Week 16 with a groin injury. This is unfortunate because obviously Kamara had been really good, and we know what he likes to do around the holidays. He had that massive 6-touchdown game on Christmas Day a couple years ago that I think every fantasy manager remembers. Where Kendry Miller is the expected primary backup here, where does he fall for you in the running back rankings? Oh, I think there is a howling dog. Is he done howling? Okay. Where does Kendry Miller fall with Kamara out against the Packers?
I've been getting a lot of like Kendry Miller or Patrick Taylor questions, and for me, it's Kendry Miller. We're assuming Kamara is out with the groin injury right now. I would be really shocked if he played. The Saints season is essentially done, so there's no reason to rush him back and try to make the playoffs. I don't think that they're in contention at all. Miller had 9 carries, 46 yards. Looked pretty good, 5.1 yards per carry. So I don't think that it's a great matchup against the Packers. They've been tough against the run, but they've also at times kind of forgotten about the run, and the guys, gain quite a bit of yards against them, and they just sort of bend but don't break sometimes. They're 11th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. But if you're just looking for a pick up and start, Jerome Ford probably top of the list, although you could argue that Miller should be right there, just based on the DTR change at quarterback for the Browns. So, it's funny because I was poo-pooing the Kendry Miller love a couple of weeks ago, but you guys all turned out to be correct, that he looks pretty good. And finally, it is like waiting for Guffman. Guffman has finally arrived, and now Kendry Miller is a viable fantasy start in semifinals. I mean, we're back, like you're just talking about Amir Abdullah, and now we're discussing Kendry Miller as a pretty good sneaky start.
Let's get rid of Dennis Allen. This is the kind of stuff you get. Between Alvin Kamara and James Conner, one of them had to finish the season without a full slate of healthy games. We've been talking about that throughout the year, and in this case, it was Kamara. And Conner, the Iron Man, is the only running back surviving in Arizona. Another running back news, Kenneth Walker is practicing in full with the shoulder injury that has kept him out in recent weeks. Zach Charbonnet was obviously very strong in his absence. Now he is banged up with an oblique injury. TBD whether he'll be good to go. Should be, but keep an eye on that. Assuming both are playing, you are how confident in Walker? And I assume Charbonnet goes back to the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not confident both will be playing. I'm hopeful that one will be playing. Otherwise, we are now trying to project Kenny McIntosh in a lead back role. Kenny McIntosh has 4.5 yards per carry this year, so that's good. He's a young running back that we haven't seen much of coming out of Georgia. He did average 829 yards. Or he rushed for 829 and caught 505 yards his senior year for Georgia. Sorry, I bungled that, but he rushed for 829, received for 505, which is a lot in college. So good receiving back, 10 touchdowns. So, and Georgia recruited him, so he must be pretty good. So if both players are out, he'll be ranked curiously high, and it'll be one of these plug them in and cross your fingers that they don't do some weird stuff with a practice squad back or whatever. I don't even know who else is on the roster at the moment, but I would sort of cross that bridge when we come to it, when it comes to projecting this backfield. I would expect Charbonnet to play. I don't know about Walker, but if both are out, then McIntosh is a plug and play RB3 flex type.
There is no other running back on their active depth chart. There are some practice squad guys who I've never heard of in my entire life, such as Britton Brown and George Holani. So there's that. Hopefully we do get one of these guys. And if both are good to go, you're playing Walker as an RB2 still?
Yeah, I think every time that Walker has been active, he's been the lead back in this backfield. Okay. So Holani was active last week, and when you said Holani, I recognized that name, and I remember seeing it in the RBBC report on the site when I was looking at this. Charbonnet saw 9 touches, McIntosh 3, Holani 3. Although McIntosh played 9 snaps to Holani's 3. So interesting that they both got 3 carries, though we might see a kind of an ugly RBBC where they're seeing if one of them gets hot before committing to one of them for the second half.
George Pickens will be out again for the Steelers with this lingering hamstring injury. Very annoying for him and for any fantasy managers. We've tried now a couple times, I think, to figure out who the Steelers wide receiver to play is. Are you just staying away from the whole group, or do you like anyone given the matchup with the Ravens?
It is a pretty good matchup, and I, was mad at Kelvin Austin for that, performance, the week that we thought that he was going to have a good one. Also in Scott Fishbowl, punt returner, we thought that there was some upside there. Didn't do much as a receiver, although he did draw a PI in the end zone to set up a score for them. And then last week he had 5 for 65 and on 5 targets. So it's oftentimes that week after you're counting on them, where you now they're left for dead, and they are dead to you, that they actually come out and have a good game. And he had an excellent game, 5 of 5. He had 5 targets and caught all 5 for 65 yards. He would be, other than Pat Freiermuth, who has been really pretty good, solid since Pickens' injury. Those are the 2 players that I'd be willing to start in the passing game if necessary. Austin is an okay start, especially in this matchup against the Ravens, since they are a pass funnel.
Cade Otton did not practice Thursday with a knee injury, was seen in a brace. We'll need to keep an eye on him as to whether he plays. He's also, just for fantasy, not been as good lately, been slumping quite significantly. That has correlated with Jaylen McMillan, the wide receiver for Tampa Bay, having a little bit of a breakout the last couple of games. If Otton is out, does that raise your interest or confidence in McMillan and put him into legit starter consideration?
I think he's already in legit starter consideration due to his last 2 games. I mean, everybody was excited about Jaylen McMillan, and then he had 4 games where he had sort of an increased role, was playing at least wide receiver 3 type snaps. I think some of those games were prior to the Godwin injury, but from week 7 to 13, he had 10 catches for 86 yards over 4 games on 20 targets. So that's not great. That's 20 yards, 22 yards a game, 21 yards a game. But over the last 2 weeks, 4 for 59, 2 touchdowns on 7 targets, and 5 for 75 and a touchdown on 6 targets. Be hard pressed to find a receiver that is a lot hotter than McMillan in terms of his scoring, and 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, decent yardage. So against Dallas, 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the receiver position. It's a good matchup. Baker Mayfield is playing great football. You mentioned the Cade Otton injury. I would bet that this is you're not confident throwing McMillan in there, but you're hoping that he can continue his hot trend. And based on the short term, it's not like you're praying for it. He's done it the last 2 weeks, and there's no reason he can't do it again based on his matchup with the Cowboys cornerbacks.
In San Francisco, we're back to the running back room conversation because Isaac Guerendo, after being for sure out and then actually not, and he played, and we didn't get to play Patrick Taylor, now is very unlikely to play Sunday with a hamstring injury. Still a chance, so don't count your eggs or your chickens or whatever the saying is. But looks like Guerendo will be out, which means Patrick Taylor, theoretically, would be the lead back. We will just continue with the assumption that he is out. How interested are you playing in playing Taylor, and does anybody else hit the radar for you there?
Yeah, I posted on Twitter and Blue Sky today that I added Patrick Taylor to sneaky starts, but it's complicated. I have very complicated feelings about this because we've been burned by this before, where the guy is the next man up and it doesn't happen at all. Either he's in a timeshare or he just doesn't perform well, or somebody leapfrogs him from the practice squad or below. So the thing that worries me here is that Guerendo was severely banged up last week. We barely thought, he barely had a chance to play, ended up playing, and they gave Patrick Taylor a grand total of 0 touches in that game. So that scares me, because if Guerendo, if an injured Guerendo is that far ahead of Taylor, it makes you wonder what they're going to do heading into this game. And I think we might see a committee. They added Israel Abanikanda.
Oh, yes,
I got it. And Keyshawn Vaughn. I'm just going to call him Israel. Israel's more athletic than Patrick Taylor. So I don't know if he's up to speed, though. I believe that they had Vaughn active last week, and Israel was not. So unless I'm mistaken on that. Taylor has 14 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown this season, 1 catch for 12 yards. He had 4.4 yards per carry and 11 catches for the Packers last year. I've seen him play. He's just a solid guy that is a rotational back. I don't think that he is going to come out and tear it up, but he could have a good, productive game in the 49ers rushing game, which is one of the better in the league. They are a little banged up on the offensive line, in addition to being banged up everywhere across the entire roster. Sorry to laugh, but they have been bitten by the injury bug. It's bad. So he's not a guy you're plugging in. You want to wager a lot of money on the overs or anything like that. But he's a guy that if you are dire straits at RB3 or flex or RB2, we can be reasonably confident that he's going to be the lead back, and we'll see at least 10 carries in a really productive or typically productive passing attack or a rushing attack for the 49ers. But at the same time, we might see him get 8 touches, and then the other backs get rotated in as well, and it'd be kind of an ugly timeshare.
Risky. A couple more quick ones. David Njoku is not practicing with a hamstring injury. That'll be one to watch. Obviously, we've talked about the quarterback situation quite a bit there. Would be probably Jordan Akins again as the tight end, but given the Dorian Thompson-Robinson thing, would you be staying away from Akins, and would you even be that interested in playing Njoku if he plays?
They're all Njoku is better than Akins, but Akins was on the fantasy radar because of Jameis and the Njoku injury. But if it's DTR at quarterback, I have no confidence in Akins.
All right, Very valid. Rashad Bateman has a foot injury. He is questionable. Did not practice yesterday. TBD if he will practice today. Obviously, that Ravens receiving group is somewhat difficult to figure out. Has been rather confusing and inconsistent this year, despite Lamar Jackson being incredible. If Bateman is out, does that solidify anybody else as a solid start?
The latest on Deontay Johnson is that he's going to not play again this week, or was it?
What a situation.
He's away from the team. Okay, as of 12, Ravens rule out Nelson Aguilar, who's unable to clear concussion protocol. Deontay Johnson away from the team, and Rashad Bateman questionable with the foot injury. We are very thin. Maybe Bateman's able to play through this. I know my point per first down best ball team would really like him to be able to play since I've lost Christian Kirk and Brandon Ayuk this season. Yeah. So just looking at their depth chart, this would be a great spot for Deontay to come in and just be Deontay. But this wasn't handled well, or we've discussed this. What are we doing with Deontay Johnson if he's revolting like this? Like, it's bad. Looks like it's going to be Tylan Wallace, Devontae Walker could be in a bigger, in terms of playing time role. You might see more likely Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews on the field together. That would make the most sense to me, to really ramp up both of their snaps and play a lot of 12 so that you don't have to play, Tylan Wallace, Devontae Walker, big snaps if Bateman, Deontay Johnson, and Aguilar are all out. That makes the most sense to me, and that's where I would probably go with some of the stats. Although, Tylan Wallace and Devontae Walker have some big playability. Tylan Wallace does for sure, and Walker is a rookie, so he's kind of an unknown there. So probably doesn't hurt Lamar Jackson a whole lot, because there are some people he can lean on that he likes, likely Andrews, Flowers, and Justice Hill as a receiver out of the backfield. But I don't think a whole lot of people were starting Bateman, and I don't think that there's we can go start Tylan Wallace or we can go start Walker. One of them might have a good game, but who knows who it's going to be.
If anyone who's been following me long enough, of which I don't know how many there are, but I loved Tylan Wallace coming out of college. This would be so exciting for me. I don't expect it to happen, but I'll be watching with bated breath. Last little bit of injury news here. Roshan Johnson should be back from concussion this week. He's missed a couple games. For you, he had been getting some goal line carries, taking some valuable touches from Swift. Swift being inconsistent himself enough to already be hard to play with confidence. Where does Swift fall to you if Johnson is back?
Yeah, he's sort of losing that, likely losing that goal line role. Right now, he's sitting at 26. He's had some weeks where he's been higher. But if Roshan Johnson is in his usual role, and it's not that great of a matchup against Detroit, teams have to typically pass more. They have a pretty good rush defense. So you're just hoping for 15, 16 touches for Swift and some catches, and then maybe he scores a touchdown. But it's not a confident start with Johnson back. I don't think it's even a confident start if Johnson is out, just due to the matchup against Detroit.
Yeah, not great. All right. We will tackle some matchups and then get into Q&A. We'll be a little quick on these matchups because we'd like to talk. Game of the week, Buccaneers at Cowboys. Over-under is 48.5. This is two bad defenses playing against each other and surrendering fantasy points to the opposing offenses, hopefully. Bucks are dead last against quarterbacks. So if you're feeling spicy and wanting to stream Cooper Rush, who has actually been surprisingly good lately, that is an option. But on the other side, the Cowboys are also 29th in AFPA against quarterbacks. So Baker Mayfield's a super great start. And then they're both middling at best or very bad against every other position as well. The Cowboys are 31st against wide receivers, so that's great for McMillan, which we talked about a little earlier. Main questions are for the Dallas pass catcher, because we kind of know we're playing Evans and we talked about McMillan. But for the Dallas pass catchers, obviously beyond CeeDee Lamb, do you have any interest there with a couple guys that have been, they have a couple, we can hit a big play or catch a touchdown, but if we don't, we're usually not very good type receivers. Do any of them become startable for you with this matchup?
It would be a really, really, really deep league if I'm starting Brandon Cooks, but this is the week to start him if you have to start 6 receivers in your fantasy league. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at CeeDee Lamb has been solid with Rush, getting lots and lots of targets. I think Ferguson at tight end, because of the nature of the tight end position, is startable, especially in this kind of a format. The 48.5 seems a little low to me, and I think they're probably discounting Cooper Rush at quarterback. Like if Dak was at quarterback, you're probably looking at 55 or 54 in this one or something like that. So if Cooper is able to keep up his competent play, you called it good, I would call it competent. 1.8 touchdowns, I think, over his last few games. Then this is going to go over, I think, because Baker Mayfield's going to Baker Mayfield. But I think you're just starting the bigger names, and that includes McMillan as a sneaky start. But Evans obviously, and Lamb and Ferguson, I think, is startable.
And then Rico Dowdle, Bucky Irving, Rachaad White are all startable at running back.
Yeah, I would say Dowdle is a must start. I think Bucky Irving is approaching must start status. I'm really interested to see where he lands next year in ADP, because he is, every time I see a highlight of him, it's electric. Like, he's a star in the making, in my opinion. And I think it's just a matter of time before he is the not so much the bell cow, but the very, very, very lead back in that backfield.
Big agree. Fade of the week, a wild couple of teams to make this the fade of the week. If you were looking at this at the start of the year, Texans at Chiefs. Rookie of the year, next big thing at quarterback, the already best quarterback in the league. Should have been two amazing offenses. They really haven't been. And now you have a banged up Mahomes and a much more uncertain receiving depth chart than what we would have expected. And CJ Stroud has simply not played up to rookie CJ Stroud levels at all this year, particularly for fantasy purposes. So the one mostly good on defense, but the one big hole would be the Texans' AFPA against wide receivers. They are 29th. The question there is, who would you play among the Chiefs wide receivers? And then you have Pacheco and Hunt. Houston is third in AFPA against running backs. So it's really tough to play either of them. They've both been vulturing each other's touches. Joe Mixon, you have to play, but the Chiefs defense is, as we've talked about throughout this year, insanely good against running backs. And then Nico Collins is a must play. Outside of those, and what is your interpretation of the receivers? How are you looking at this game?
Well, I would say for the Chiefs, I mentioned it earlier, that anybody that has Xavier Worthy or DeAndre Hopkins is sort of in a position where they have to start them, and there is upside because it is Patrick Mahomes, and they have had some good games recently. Like Xavier Worthy, 9 touches last week for 76 yards and 11 targets with a touchdown, a running touchdown. He's had at least 5 catches in 3 straight games. Some of those are like, they're quiet games, but he's getting at least 9 PPR fantasy points in his last 5 games. So that's something. That's like your baseline, you're hoping, and then you hope for a big play out of him, which he does have that speed. DeAndre Hopkins, PPR, good route runner, threat in the red zone, certainly for Patrick Mahomes. So in this matchup against Houston, they're both startable as wide receiver 3-4 types. I would go with Pacheco over Hunt, even though last week we saw basically a timeshare between the two. The week before, Pacheco was edging ahead. I would expect him to get back into the lead. He's a better runner than Hunt. But for some reason last week we saw pretty much a timeshare split down the middle. Not a great matchup against Houston. So he's not like a must start or anything, but he's an RB2, RB3 fringe guy. Mixon's a must play. I am getting some, I got some questions about Mixon. Like, why are they, do I start him? He's going to sit. I'm like, why is he going to sit? And he's like, well, Houston is locked into the 4 seed. And I didn't realize that. I don't know if that's actually true. I think it looks like they're playing it looks like they're playing to win. Mixon's off the injury report, expected to play. But it is a bad matchup against Kansas City. So he's going to have to do some work as a receiver, I think, to meet expectations. Collins is a must play, as you mentioned. I don't think, Tank Dell is okay. It's a dart throw now at this point. We're not confident in Tank Dell. We're not really confident in Dalton Schultz, but they're both startable in a pinch.
The Texans are locked into their division title, but I don't think they're locked into the 4 seed because they're only 1 game back of the Steelers for the 3 seed. So I don't know where that information came from, but I don't know if I believe it. All right, let's go through positional matchups. We will breathe through these and get to Q&A. At the quarterback position, the most possibly frustrating player of the year, for me at least, Kyler Murray gets the Carolina Panthers, who are 25th in AFPA. Also, caveat, there are more frustrating players who just have never scored points. The problem with Kyler is he scores a lot of points, and then he doesn't score a lot of points, and you don't know when. But really good matchup for him. And then Matthew Stafford, if you're interested in a little sneakier stream, gets the Jets, who are 31st in AFPA. Yes, it is the year 2024. And the Jets defense, which should be one of the best in the league, is in fact one of the worst in the league against quarterbacks. Do you like both these guys and any other sneaky starts you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think it's funny because Kyler comes in so high every week, and it's just like, well, yeah, he's a typical 19 point scorer. He's had a couple bad games. People are frustrated with him with a couple of 10-point games. I think he's got three 10-point or less games in his last 6. He's also got a 28-point game in there, 29-point game, and an 18-point game against Seattle 2 weeks ago. So I get it. But I think in this one against Carolina, he's a good start. And then Stafford is boosted. I wrote him up for sneaky start, but he's obviously good with Nakua and Cooper Kupp in the lineup. And the thing that makes this an interesting one is that the Jets offense is now showing some life. So this could be kind of a higher scoring game if the Rams defense doesn't shut them down. Definitely both these players are startable.
Yeah, like that call. On the bad side, Tua Tagovailoa gets the 49ers, who, despite all their injuries, are up to 4th in AFPA against quarterbacks. It's not a cold weather game, which is good for Tua, or at least not as cold as it could be. But do you have any confidence in starting him, or are you looking for another option here?
Yeah, at home, I think I feel pretty good about him. He's coming off of a 4-point game against Houston indoors, 3 interceptions, really a bad game for him. But in his 4 previous games, he had 24, 29, 25, and 24 against Vegas, New England, Green Bay, and the Jets. So just the 49ers, their AFPA is good, but they are banged up. And I feel like, the way Tua was playing prior to last week against Houston, feel pretty confident about starting him as a low-end QB1, high-end QB2.
At the running back position, Jerome Ford and the Raiders, we hit on a little bit above. Ford gets the Bengals, who are 25th in AFPA, and the Raiders get the Jaguars, who are 28th in AFPA. Some playable plays there. Ramondre Stevenson is an interesting one. He gets the Bills, who are 24th. Also can catch the ball if they trail. And by if they trail, I mean when they trail after about 2 drives. If that. Do you like Ramondre Stevenson at all and any other sneaky start running backs?
I don't like him. He's a viable RB2 at this point. He hasn't scored a touchdown in his last 5 games. So he has failed to go over 13 PPR points in 5 straight, even though he's seen 21, 24, 8, 21, and 14 touches in that span. So you're hoping, the big workload, pretty good matchup with the respect that the Bills are not as good against the run as they are against the pass. So you're hoping he can generate 70 total yards, 80 total yards, and score a touchdown. And he's a decent bet to do that. He's got 7 touchdowns on the season, but it's just been a dry spell here over the last 5 weeks.
On the bad side of that, Breece Hall, who will be expectantly the starter again, is facing the Rams, who are 8th in AFPA, and the Jaguars running backs get the Raiders, who are actually 9th in AFPA, which is not bad for them. More importantly, obviously, the Jaguars' problem is, well, who's getting the touches and who's getting the valuable touches between Etienne and Bigsby has been hard to figure out there. And the Jets, Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen, are both starting to get a few more touches than you would like as a Breece Hall manager. So are you playing one of these or any of these three guys, regardless?
You might be in a position to
Thompson?
start Breece Hall. He had 11 touches for 51 yards and a touchdown, so he posted a decent game last week. But Isaiah Davis had 6 touches and Braylon Allen had 2. So it does appear, I think Braylon Allen got dinged up in that game too. But it does appear that Isaiah Davis may be edging ahead there as the backup. I don't like the matchup, but this, like I said, it could be a high-scoring game with the Jets and the Rams. So Breece Hall tends to score when the Jets are scoring a lot of touchdowns. As for Jacksonville, I'm trying to stay away from this, but if I had to start one of the two and I had both, I would go with ETN since he most recently led this backfield in touches. 2 weeks ago, it was Tank Bigsby. But last week, it was 18-11, the ratio between Travis Etienne and Bigsby. Etienne, obviously, the pass catching back too, so he's getting the high point touches on top of it, but also led 14-11 just in carries. So that would be the route I would go. Vegas, I don't look at them as a really stout rush defense, but they are decent, 9th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position.
At wide receiver, the only one I have in the good, because a lot of them are just either too obviously startable or the matchups don't match up with people who are interesting, is the Seahawks, who get the Vikings, who are 30th and have felt even softer than that recently, just off of vibes. Feels like receivers are torching them. Main reason I put this here is because I've been seeing a lot of DK Metcalf questions. He's been very disappointing lately. Obviously, Jackson Smith-Njigba has come on quite strong, and you're probably feeling great about playing him if you have him rostered. But for Metcalf, how excited or confident are you in this particular matchup? Do you think he gets a bounce back?
Well, I think he's talented enough to. Geno Smith looks like he's going to play, so that's good. The Vikings are a pass funnel. They've allowed the second fewest rushing yards this year, plus the Seahawks are very banged up at running back. So if the Seahawks are smart, they go very pass heavy and try to exploit the one weakness or the seeming weakness of the Vikings is the pass defense. So that could lead to a big game for Jackson Smith-Njigba is almost a must start at this point, but Metcalf should be able to bounce back from his sort of quiet play. I've got him at wide receiver 24, which, looking at his career is pretty low for him. He's usually in the teens, but it is a good matchup. He's just kind of fallen behind JSN in targets and role, but this is certainly a game where he could have a big one. I think there's going to be some rain in this one as well. Not surprising since it's Seattle. So keep an eye on the weather as we get closer to Sunday.
Incidentally, I did some research and a write-up on Metcalf this week for an NFL.com article, and the Vikings are kind of a deep pass funnel defense. They are very good against quick and short passes, but very bad against the deep ball. And Metcalf is the deeper ball receiver of the group there. So maybe some hope. On the bad side, there are a lot of interesting ones here. I will just list them off, and you tell me which ones you care about or are interesting. You don't have to hit them at all. Hit them all. Falcons wide receivers with the Penix move get the Giants, who are 8th in AFPA. The Eagles wide receivers, who both were great last week, but previously had been a little more questionable, get the Commanders, who are 6th. Zay Flowers was seemingly the only remaining Ravens receiver, gets the Steelers, who are 10th. Marvin Harrison Jr., despite what we just said about Kyler, the Panthers are actually 9th in AFPA against receivers, and he has been so inconsistent. And then Calvin Ridley gets the Colts, who are 3rd in AFPA. And I will throw one more in there because Jalen Waddle is now listed as doubtful to play. Tyreek Hill gets the 49ers, who are 2nd. He has also been kind of disappointing lately. I saw a stat this week that he hasn't had a 30-yard reception since week 1, which is absurd. So any big takeaways there? Any guys you normally would play that you're benching, or is it all more run-of-the-mill?
Well, I think all these guys, except for maybe Harrison, are ranked a little lower than they have been due to these matchups, due to just the scoring environment in these games. He's probably still starting London in most situations, but really up in the air as to who Penix is going to vibe well with. I would be less inclined to start Mooney just due to the uncertain nature of the quarterback. Feel pretty good about AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, just from the standpoint that I think Washington will be able to put up some points against Philly, and so Philly's going to have to throw the ball some this game as opposed to just run it 40 times. So feeling okay about those two. Flowers is probably okay as well due to how banged up the Ravens receiving core is, and he should see a lot of targets if all those guys are out. Harrison is interesting. I think Carolina is good against receivers because they're so bad against the run. I mean, that's part of it. Harrison's interesting because he is our number 2 receiver in the Week 16 breakout receiver model. And that this is not something that always works, but we've had a lot of hits over this course of the season. This is a spot. His expected fantasy points over the last 3 games is 14.1. That's half PPR, and he's only scored 8.5. He's due for a big game, so don't be surprised. That's one reason to maybe put him in. And then Ridley, I think with the concern coming out of last week, Ridley's also in the breakout receiver model, by the way. He's more down like 9. But the concern coming out last week was that he didn't get many targets after Mason Rudolph came into the game, but he's seen about 24-25% of the targets in all of Mason Rudolph's pass attempts this year. So I'm not too worried that he is going to get ignored or anything by Mason Rudolph. So it's just a bad matchup, but maybe it's a better, more competent quarterback. I don't know who's better between Mason Rudolph and Will Levis. Apparently the Titans think that it's Rudolph right now.
Kind of feels like a Winston situation there, but yeah, it's messy. All right, last bit, the tight ends here. Brenton Strange, that is right. Classic stud tight end, Brenton Strange, who legitimately was a stud last week when we streamed him with Evan Ingram out. Evan Ingram out for the year, so Strange is just the starter moving forward. They get the Raiders, who are 30th in AFPA, so that's pretty sweet if you picked him up and are trying to stream through the stretch. Dalton Kincaid gets the Patriots, who are 24th in AFPA. Obviously, very difficult with the Bills to figure out who Josh Allen's going to throw the ball to any given week, particularly after he just completely ignores Amari Cooper last week. And then on the bad side, Mark Andrews gets the Steelers, who are 7th, but you hit on the fact that a lot of their pass catchers out. Maybe he sees more snaps and more targets. Hunter Henry, who's been kind of you can get 5 for 50 pretty often from him. He gets the Bills, who are 9th. And Kyle Pitts, if you were still considering starting him, which you shouldn't be, gets the Giants, who are 2nd. Any of these swing your start or sit decisions for tight end?
Yeah, Brenton Strange was a sneaky start last week. He ended up with 12 targets, 11 for 73, very low ADOT, but that's a 18.3 PPR week if you play PPR. He was 2nd to Brian Thomas in targets, 14. Mac Jones starting to play with a bit of confidence and swagger. Raiders are giving up 5.7 catches for 64 yards and 0.43 touchdowns per game to the position. So definitely like Strange. He's a low-end tight end 1 for me based on that usage, given the nature of the tight end position. Kincaid, yeah, if you have to, could work out. It's just one of those. But yeah, I would prefer to play Mark Andrews in that, given what's going on with the Ravens passing receiving core. And then Henry's fine. Pitts is trying to stay away from that, especially with the quarterback change. It just probably makes things worse. But who knows? I mean, maybe Penix is eating breakfast with Pitts every day, and the two are real close. We'll find out this week.
All righty. Tons of stuff and tons of questions. So we'll get to what we can here in the Q&A. If you are here and you have dropped a question in chat, and it is a sit question, of which there are a gazillion, I will remind you, and I will beg of you to heed this warning. We will not get to player versus player start sit questions, but you can answer them very easily yourself on 4for4.com in John Paulson's rankings, which are so nicely listed out with different scoring formats, with the matchups, green or red. It's lovely. It's just beautiful to look at, honestly. So go look at it, and that will help you answer your own start sit questions. So we will tackle the non-start sit questions or the start sit questions that are super chats, because shout out the super chatters. We'll start off with one of those from Michael Quinzel, always active in the chat. Thanks, Michael. In my Superflex tight end premium PPR dynasty semifinals, slight favorite, need one flex. DeAndre Hopkins, Brenton Strange, Tony Pollard, or Cedric Tillman. Thank you for all the advice and insight. Merry Christmas. D-Hop, Strange, Pollard, or Tillman. Tight end premium helps Strange.
Can you put the question up on the screen?
I can. My apologies.
No, don't worry. Tight end premium.
Wow. It's not Tillman.
I
think we can eliminate him.
I think it's between I kind of think it's between Pollard. I'm sorry, but yeah, Pollard and Strange. So let me pull up the FFPC rankings here, since that's tight end premium.
Yeah.
I don't know why that matters that it's dynasty, but I think he likes to tell us that he's in a dynasty.
True. Pollard has a very average matchup. Tyjae Spears started coming on a little bit.
Strange is at 69, which is funny. Pollard coming in at 56. Pretty good matchup for Pollard, I would say. Colts are pretty bad against the run. That's probably the way I would lean, but I would keep an eye on Pollard's Strange has also been dinged up and limited in practice.
True.
Both are pretty favorable matchups. Strange's is even better, but Pollard, you get that rushing floor. I think I would lean that direction, and Hopkins just to check him for sure. Coming at 81.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
The rankings say Pollard over Strange. It's probably the way I would go. If Strange has another 11 catch game, then I will be wrong. So just keep that in mind. Pollard is probably the better, safer play.
Mac Jones playing some surprisingly useful fantasy football. Still don't know if he's a good quarterback. I don't think he is. Samuel Burks. Will Trey McBride finally score a touchdown this weekend? Now, it's pretty impossible to predict touchdowns, but it is extremely notable. Obviously, if you've been watching any Cardinals game all year or on social media, you've probably seen that Trey McBride is about to set the record for most catches in a season without a touchdown. The Panthers have allowed the most touchdowns to the tight end position all year. I think he scores 2 touchdowns this week.
I just want to. Michael Quinzel also wanted Hunter Henry to be added to that, so I've got him at 74, which is below.
Okay.
Brenton Strange.
Good call out.
Yeah, there's 2 ways you can go with the Trey McBride thing. You could just every week say that he's going to score this week, and then when you're right, you're like, "See, I told you that he was going to score this week." Or you could just, based on what you've seen. I mean, he is so due for a touchdown. I would have to think he gets 1 this year, or he'll be like Jake Ferguson last year and be very underused or not score a lot of touchdowns, and all of a sudden have 3 in the playoffs. I don't know if the Cardinals are going to make the playoffs. Sure, he's going to score 1 this week. Then thank me when it happens.
I write a bold predictions article for NFL.com, and that was my bold prediction, was that he would score 2 touchdowns this week. They're going to make it happen. Kyler Murray said so on his social media, so you know it's real. That's not true, but maybe. Tyler Sperry with a super chat. Shout out Tyler Sperry. This question we might have to parse through a little bit. I think there might be some typos. Thoughts on stage Miller? I'm going to assume that is a
Kendry. That's Kendry.
Yeah, a phone autocorrect for Kendry. Don't know if I should start Pacheco, and didn't Rain hurt a kicker? I think
he is.
Are the Vikings playing the Seahawks? Yes. So
yeah.
Will Reichard is playing the Seahawks in Seattle, where there may be some rain. So wanting to know if there's a better kicker there. That's an interesting one. Kendry Miller versus Pacheco. I'd be curious what your rankings say there.
Yeah, I think we deserve $5 just for trying to read that question, Tyler. No offense, my friend. I have Miller 1 spot ahead of Pacheco.
Ooh.
And this is half PPR. I don't know what scoring. We don't have any idea what scoring system this is. Kendry Miller at 24, Pacheco at 25. Matchup is slightly better, maybe moderately better. Green Bay versus Houston. Houston's third in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. Green Bay 11th. Miller looked pretty good. Should have that backfield mostly to himself. Jamal Williams, they didn't seem like they were too interested in getting him any touches last week with Kamara, leaving and then Miller getting some touches. So you could see Miller in a 15 to 20 touch role. Pacheco, we're not so sure about given what happened last week with Kareem Hunt. I would assume that they're going to get him back into the lead role, especially with Mahomes banged up, but that's tough. So
Yeah.
I lean Miller right now, but keep an eye on the rankings. And then as for, the kicker, I don't generally adjust projections for weather until we get closer to the day. There have been so many times where I have adjusted and then all of a sudden Sunday comes and it's fine. So I typically Sunday morning am making those changes, or, if it's a Saturday game, Saturday morning, because once we get to that day, we have a pretty good forecast. We have a pretty good idea, and there should still be time for you to make a change at kicker if you need to. So on Sunday morning, I will be checking how heavy this rain is. If it's bad, then I will be adjusting the Minnesota and Seattle projections.
Beauty. Rashik Barron with another super chat. It is a start-sit question, but this is one way to sneak sit questions into the Q&A. People is throw them in his super chats. White, Ford, Rico for a flex, and then Shakir or Flowers, Thielen. Is all of these people?
I think this is two different.
The clearer you write your questions, the clearer we can answer them.
I'm reading it as his first three there for the flex, and then he's trying to decide between the three for a receiver position. So that's how I'm going to answer
it that way.
All right.
Yeah.
It's Rico, so you got to start Rico Dowdle. He's at 10 this week. He's on fire, running the ball. He might get outscored by Rachaad White or Jerome Ford, but I don't think so. So I would go with Rico in the flex. At receiver, and we also don't have a scoring system for this, so try to put those in. Shakir at 32.5 PPR, Flowers at 27, Thielen at 36. So my feeling here, Thielen has actually been pretty good since he came back. If it's full PPR, he's intriguing. Flowers to me is probably the most talented at this point. And then we have this issue with the Ravens receivers where he really should see a floor of 7 or 8 targets. Would you agree with that, Matt? Like with everybody out, that he needs to be peppered in targets. So, I don't like the, playing against Pittsburgh because it tends to be lower scoring and everything, but it's not like the cornerbacks there have been elite on a fantasy points per route covered standpoint. They're all sort of mediocre based on my numbers. So I would probably go with Flowers.
The one possibly useful note there, when they played earlier this year, Flowers had 6 targets. Rashad Bateman had 5, so those are all going to be missing. Justice Hill had 7. Isaiah Likely had 5. Flowers only caught 2 for 39 yards, did score a touchdown. So you're obviously hoping for more than that. And the touchdown was very late in the game. But was the second most targeted player, Justice Hill being number 1. So you'd expect with the receivers being out, he will see it minimum 6 targets, probably more than the 7-8 plus range, like you mentioned. So I would agree on all fronts there. Samuel Burks, if I have been writing Judy as a hot hand wide receiver, what receiver should I look to pick up with the Browns changing QBs to replace those wide receiver points? I bring this up not for us to name all the waiver wire wide receivers, but mainly to say, outside of probably Jaylen McMillan, who is a guy you could pick up and would be a tough question, you are starting Judy over any other reasonable waiver wire receiver still? Or would you be interested in guys like I don't know, Christian Watson, Josh Downs, Cedric Tillman. Probably not because he's the same quarterback.
I have Judy at 30. So you're starting him over the vast majority, over everybody to be able to get on the waiver wire. You just need to expect the worst. Prepare yourself emotionally for a 1 for 13 from DTR. If you want to get out of that, if you really just aren't interested in any receiver with Dorian Thompson-Robinson catching passes from him, then Jaylen McMillan would be the top guy that I think you could pick up and start, somebody that's available on waivers. Then you're getting into Downs and Christian Watson, as you mentioned, Romeo Dobbs. I don't know if those guys are available. Marquez Valdez-Scantling has his own quarterback change happening. Jalen Coker would be another one to consider.
Okay.
I've got him at 50. I've got McMillan at 40 and Coker at 50, possibly, or is probably available on the waiver wire. I would say Coker, you do the waiver wire watch for us. You probably have a better handle on who's available and who's not.
Coker is.
I think Coker is intriguing because I thought he would come in and sort of be blocked in the slot by Adam Thielen, but he ended up playing a lot of snaps and has a very nice rapport with Bryce Young there. So that's a dart throw, but you're talking about benching a Jerry Jeudy for Jalen Coker, and that would be pretty dicey given the way Judy's playing. I probably would still go with Jeudy and just, deal with the results. But if McMillan's available, that would be a tough decision, especially given the way that DTR has played.
Yeah, McMillan's pretty interesting to me. Him and Jalen Coker are the only two receivers in my waiver wire column this week who made the top 10 overall, and really the only two that are worth a strong consideration, in my opinion. So good name there. And McMillan's the only one I would play or even consider over Jeudy, I think. We'll end with this one. I like this one because it's a good bit of strategy for your fantasy playoffs. Armin says, I know it's a week early, but any ideal week 17 DST? Any going against Giants, Saints, or Titans should be good, but any opinions? Obviously, we can take a look at the week 17 schedule and pick some that we like, but I think the main call out here is good move from you, Armin, and anybody else who's competing in your semis right now. If you've got a couple bench spots that are filled with, Cedric Tillman type guys, Marquez Valdez-Scantling type guys, I wouldn't drop your handcuff running backs who could become superstars, because look what Kendry Miller is going to do this week, potentially. But these sort of like wide receiver fours that you were maybe throwing into a flex spot during bye weeks earlier in the year, feel free to jettison one of those guys and add the best possible defense now ahead of waivers next week so that you have a good setup for your finals week. I really like that move and do it in many of my leagues. Any particular favorites for you that are likely available?
Yeah, and I don't know their availability, but I think they're probably pretty widely available. The Miami Dolphins are at Cleveland next week. And if we have either DTR or Winston, they're in good shape. And we also could have wind
Cleveland as well.
Yeah, we could have some wind and some weirdness going on. I've been talking about Indianapolis because they play Tennessee this week. They're also at the Giants next week. That's a nice matchup. They're competent defense. I wouldn't say they're good, but they're competent. Jacksonville, probably less than competent, but they're at least at home against Tennessee. Great matchup. I don't think Chicago is widely available, but they're playing at home against Seattle. I think that's pretty good. These are all green matchups, dark green matchups in our hotspots report. New Orleans at home against Vegas. We'd kind of like to have a outdoor weather game, but this is not a bad one against Vegas given the quarterback situation there. Philly not available. Seattle possibly available at Chicago. A little bit intriguing there. Caleb Williams up and down. Vegas at New Orleans in that same game. Intriguing with Spencer Rattler at quarterback, although I did see people touting Rattler that he didn't turn the ball over once he came in. Jake Hayner was having trouble. Washington at home against Atlanta with Penix at quarterback.
Ooh.
So those are a few to consider. Really going through all those just looking through them: Miami, Indy, Washington, and then Seattle. Those 4 sort of jump out to me as not just teams that I don't know where the Colts are in the playoff hunt. I don't know, are they out of it? But
yeah,
everybody's got something to play for there too, plus good matchups. So I think those are the best defenses to highlight right now.
the Colts, they will be 7-8. I think they might be able to make it in with a tiebreaker over the Chargers or Broncos, but I don't know if that's true. I feel pretty unconfident. I think they're basically out. They would need some miracles. Tons of good ones listed. All of those pretty much that you listed are rostered in less than 50% of Yahoo leagues, which makes them very addable. You should be able to find one of them for sure. The Dolphins, I think, is my favorite. Given the matchup and the fact that they're actually a good defense. Like a lot of these other ones are just the matchup's so bad that we can play even a bad defense against them. The Dolphins have been pretty good on defense, very good against quarterbacks, and that's going to be a disaster of an offense with who knows who at quarterback turning the ball over in probably bad weather. That one has to be one of the top fantasy plays of the week.
I think
So love that one.
Off the top of my head, I would say Miami first, Washington second, with Penix there, and Washington playing pretty well, and then you get into some of these other guys. But you could go to Hotspots report, sort by week 17. All the top plays are pushed up to the top there at the on the screen. So
beauty, do that. Listen, there are a lot of questions here. We can't get to all of them, but there are so many good tools on 4for4.com that you can answer a lot of them there. So go check them out. Big pod, obviously, semis week. It's a big week. Hopefully, we are both still in championship contention next week so that we can ride along with the listeners that are still left. But we will sign off there, heading into week 16. May you all win your championships. AMA?
Yeah, so I wanted to go over a few scheduling notes for us over the next 2 weeks since we have the holiday next week. I really wish the NFL hadn't added a week, which is really screwing with my Christmas. But here we are. I'm doing a Discord chat today at noon Pacific. So a normal voice chat, 3 o'clock Eastern. Next Monday or next Tuesday is Christmas Eve. I'm planning to do a Discord normal chat, voice chat at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern to get you ready for 2 games on Wednesday. What is the NFL doing? 2 games on Christmas.
On Netflix, mind you.
Monday and Tuesday will be pretty normal from when you can expect projections and rankings to be up. I just want to tell everybody this so that they're not expecting things that aren't going to happen. Normal Tuesday. I'm gonna get sneaky starts up on Tuesday evening, so that's all done. Usually it goes up Wednesday. Then I am travel. We obviously have Christmas on the 25th. I'm gonna be doing the rankings updates for those games, and then I am traveling to Santa Barbara on the 26th through the 28th for my son's basketball tournament. And Matt and I are going to try to do a normal live stream from the hotel. You're going to be where you are, but I'm going to be at the hotel on the 27th at the normal time. So we're going to see if we can make that happen. And then after my chat on Tuesday, Space Ghost Force in the Discord is going to open up another chat so that people can put their questions in via text. And throughout the week, I'm going to try to go in there as I travel and do my things and have time to answer questions. Consider it an emergency only situation. So if it's a really big, tough decision, post it in there and I'll do my best to get to it. I think that wraps it all up. But we got 2 games on Wednesday next week. We got a game on Thursday, and then we got 3 games on Saturday. So there's a lot going on, plus my trip. So I'm doing my best to try to be there for everybody championship week. I think this is a plan that we can execute. Matt, what do you think?
Sunday, and there is a Monday game. So 5 days, 5 different days of football Christmas week. Good heavens. We will try to do it. For anyone who pays attention to the waiver stuff, my Monday waiver stuff will be the same. The Tuesday AMA, because we normally do that so late and it's Christmas Eve night, will be I'll respond by chats instead of doing a voice thing in the Discord channel. So
And then,
if you have questions, you can still drop them in there.
One last thing. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
C Knight in there. I could see C Knight asking Discord info. If you just Google 444 Discord, the top result is 444's Discord community. I think you can get in that way. You could also click on the second one, which is the Discord 444 Fantasy Football, and you should be able to make your way. You have to be a member of the site, subscriber to the site, but that's how you get access to a lot of the analysts and be able to answer your questions.
And a lot of good tools, and the waiver wire column in its full entirety, and many other columns in their entirety. They're all very useful. Also, if you do play in Week 18, first, shame your commissioner. Second, there is a 444 article that covers a big one that just covers Week 18 stuff, but all the other typical stuff will not be on. So that next week will be our last for this content. Hopefully we see you all there, and hopefully we're all still in championship contention. All right. Great show. Long show. Thanks for being here, everybody. We will sign off there. Adios.